All righty. Well, hey, welcome everybody. Thank you once again for visiting us at AMS Weather Band's latest webinar, a Cleanversation with Science Moms with Dr. Melissa Burt, who unfortunately is unable to join us today. But we do have Dr. Joellen Russell, Dr. Tracy Holloway, Dr. Erica Smithwick, and we are moderated by Susan Joy Hassel. Now, before we begin, I would like to address some of the audience guidelines for our webinar today. Audience, please, if you have a question during the webinar, please put those questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you look down at the bottom of your Zoom screen and find the chat button, to the left of that should be a Q&A button. Please make sure all of your questions, and just the questions, go in there. Any comments and whatnot can go in chat, but we want to make sure that all your questions, or as many of them as possible, are addressed by our audience or by our guests. So we just want to collect them all in one central spot. So the Q&A is your friend if you have a question to ask. We will also have some specific time for questions from the audience after the presentation, but they may also be addressed during the course of the presentation, just depending upon the flow of things. But now I would like to introduce today's moderator. So thank you, Susan, for joining us today and for serving as our moderator. Susan directs climate communications and is an award-winning analyst and author known for her ability to translate science into English. For over 30 years, she's helped climate scientists communicate more effectively and provided clear information to policymakers and journalists. She's written and edited high-level reports, including the first 3 U.S. national climate assessments, testified to the U.S. Senate, written an HBO documentary, and speaks and publishes widely. She tweets at ClimateComms, just at ClimateComms. So yes, with that being said, Susan, I give you the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Thanks to AMS Weather Band, to our science moms, and thanks to all of you for being here. The purpose of this webinar is to introduce the Weather Band community to science moms, their Cleanversations campaign, and their efforts to help educate the public on climate change, its links with extreme weather, and what we can do about it. So now I'd like to just introduce the 3 science moms we have with us today, and then we'll ask them some questions. We have Dr. Joellen Russell. She is the Thomas R. Brown Distinguished Chair of Integrated Science and professor at the University of Arizona in the Department of Geosciences. She currently serves as chair of the NOAA Science Advisory Board's Climate Working Group. Joellen is the mother of 2 children, 9 and 13. Her children and students' compassion, kindness, and hard work have convinced her that when it's their turn, we'll all be in good hands. We also have Dr. Tracy Holloway. She is the 2017 to 2021 Gaylord Nelson Distinguished Professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, jointly appointed in the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies and the Department of Atmospheric and Ocean Sciences. She serves as the team lead for the NASA Health and Air Quality Applied Sciences team, working on air quality management and public health. Tracy has 2 boys, ages 11 and 4 months. And we have Dr. Erica Smithwick. She's a distinguished professor of geography in the Department of Geography at the Pennsylvania State University, where she's also an associate director of the Institutes of Energy and Environment. Her research focuses on sustainable land management under climate change, with particular focus on wildlife and natural carbon storage strategies. Erica is a mom of 3 children, ages 18, 16, and 9, 2 cats, 2 dogs, and numerous goldfish. So thank you all, science moms, for being here with us today. And let me start with you, Dr. Holloway. Tracy, if I may, tell us about the Science Moms. What is it? Why did you start it? And what do you do as a science mom?
Yeah, well, thanks, Susan. It's just such a pleasure to be here this afternoon. The Science Moms program was started in 2020 as a nonpartisan effort to improve climate communication and engagement. And there'd been a lot of, of course, there's a lot of efforts to communicate climate science and raise awareness of climate change. But, thinking about, how do we connect with specific audiences with specific needs? And moms were a constituency that really hadn't been the focus of any other climate communication effort. And aside from the fact that we all have moms, within households, a lot of purchasing decisions are made by mothers. And just by virtue of our having kids and thinking about the future, this idea of looking to the future and trying to make it as good as we can for the next generation is part of our mission. So it seemed to be a nice alignment with the role of moms and the role and awareness about climate change. So the sciencmoms.org website has really been developed with a lot of great resources to give factual, science-based news you can use to moms, from books to social media to videos. That was sort of where it was all coming from.
Great, thanks. Any of you want to add anything else? No? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So let's see, let's go to you, Dr. Smithwick. How has being a parent changed the way you view climate change and your own role in trying to ensure a safe and healthy future for your children?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks again for having us all. It's great to be here and great to be part of Science Moms. It's really interesting being a mom, and I have, like, my kids are now in college and youngest is in 5th grade. So they kind of span over a decade of time. And, I think back to, even 10 years ago, we weren't having these conversations about climate change in the public sphere like we are right now. And then I think back 10 years before I had my first kid, and I felt like a loner trying to, like, this climate thing, I think that's a big deal. And so it just makes it more real when you can kind of see the pace of change as your kids are growing. And every year you start to think, well, wow, this is a different summer than they had last year. And so it makes it more real. I mean, as a scientist, you look for evidence, and I see the evidence now in my kids as they're experiencing these new weather systems, these new stories in the news every day. I see it through their eyes in a way that I didn't quite as a scientist originally.
Yeah, absolutely. Joellen, let me go to you next. One question that's on so many people's minds is, what can I personally do about such a global sprawling problem like climate change? How do you respond to that?
Oh, I think we all struggle with that, right? What can I do? Me, one mom, all by myself. And there's 2 answers. The first one, which is why do we get together, is we're not alone. We're part, I don't raise my kids by myself. In addition to my sweet hubby, I have a whole mom village that helps me. And I love bringing this part of my my identity, my day job, as a climate scientist, to helping them the way they help me. And believe me, I'm always the mom that forgets the orange slices for the soccer game. I'm that mom. But on the other hand, I really know a lot about climate. So what can we do? One of our great campaigns here at Science Moms is What to Do You, which is 3 things. It's super simple. It's a mom's to-do list. Swap, share, speak up. We can swap whenever you have an opportunity to swap from carbon polluting, burning anything, swap to the non-carbon polluting option, right? So if you're in the market for a car, go with an EV or a hybrid, right? If you are looking at a gas-powered mower, go with the electric one, right? Because there's so many options for getting our electric power that don't involve carbon pollution. Here in Arizona, we have hydropower, we have nuclear power, we have solar power, we have wind power. We have lots of options for non-carbon polluting power. So anytime you can electrify, swap. It's also for people who aren't buying new. Swap, like literally kind of swap me, used is great, new to you, vintage. Those are all great because you're extending the life before it hits the landfill. Somebody didn't have to build a new one just for you. Yay! And by the way, save a buck and the planet. Woohoo! Second, share. Whenever you're doing something awesome for our climate, non-carbon polluting, yay! Make sure that you share, blow up your group chat, post it on Facebook, put it up on Instagram. Make sure that we're making a movement out of sharing our successes. Share those wins, ladies. Woohoo! And then third, this is one of my favorites. Speak up. Write those letters to your Congress folks. Show up at the PTA and say, we need electric buses. go to your town council and say, hey, I want to support a new, half-cent tax to bury our power lines, right? I want to go electric. I want less pollution and more happiness, joy, and beautiful summers for my babies where they don't get heat stroke.
Absolutely. Erica, Tracy, either one of you want to chime in with some other things that you think about how people can help personally, maybe some things that you're engaged in?
Yeah, I maybe just to amplify that normalizing this is so important, right? And having conversations is the way you do that. And so talking to your neighbors about, hey, did you know this or did you know that? And you can do it on a Facebook chat. You can do it, as you're walking down the street, and just having it be part of the conversations. And I've seen that happen in my own neighborhood, in my own life. And and then people start asking you questions, right? And then other people start asking other questions, and it's amazing what a difference you can make. And we recently had a conversation with a neighbor about switching to a renewable electricity not distribution system. The power company will distribute your energy, but you can choose what source it comes from by switching to another power company to deliver that kind of energy. And you can go on a website, and in Pennsylvania, it's PA Power Switch, and you can look for what kinds of companies serve your area. And everybody knows how to use a website these days, and it's not that hard to put in your zip code and what power company you have, and look at those options, and you'd be surprised what you will find. And I think people just aren't aware that those resources are out there right now, and that you can just, somebody says go to the website, that's all the information you need, and then you're on your way.
And the new clean energy laws, I love it. Cleanversations, right? The new clean energy laws that were just passed are providing subsidies, rebates. Come on to sciencemoms.com and you can check out what's happening in your location. We have people here in Arizona, and my husband and I are looking at this right now. We have an ancient HVAC system. It gets hot here, and we didn't think we could afford a heat pump, but with the new rebates, we think we can do it, right? And we'll save so much more money. And the planet, right? By going to a heat pump, right? Which would be fantastic. There's also, new subsidies on EVs, there are a lot of opportunities. So come on in, the water's fine. And at sciencemoms.com, you can get an idea of what's available in your location. Personally, I am sick of sitting behind those nasty, belching black fumes buses for our school buses. And 8 districts here in Arizona have already spent $52 million of federal money on new electric school buses. And my school district here, where both of my kids are in the public schools here in Tucson, they aren't actually, they haven't taken advantage of this yet. So heck yes, I'm going to show up at the PTA meeting and say, why are we not taking their money and buying these awesome electric buses? 1, it's cleaner air, and 2, it's better health for our kids, and 3, it'll keep our planet from warming, which is really important in the 3rd fastest warming state in the nation here in Arizona. So woohoo, new clean energy laws.
Tracy, can I ask you to jump in? You have deep expertise in the arena of air pollution and climate change and the connections between them and this whole Cleanversations movement. So tell us a little bit more about all of those and their interactions.
Yeah, I think, the good news is that almost anything we do to address climate change makes our air cleaner. So we have fewer asthma attacks, longer life expectancy. We can meet, regulatory standards in the United States more effectively. And I think that this sort of win-win opportunity, like Jo Ellen mentioned around the school buses, making electric school buses not only means we don't have to use the gas and avoid the carbon emissions, but we avoid the particulate emissions, the air toxics, other compounds that are being emitted right where our kids are getting on and off the bus at their school and at their bus stop. But really, the school bus is a compelling, very visual example of this issue, but it's something that extends for really our entire energy system, from where we get our electricity, whether it's burning natural gas and coal versus renewables or other non-emitting sources, how we heat and cool our homes, what kind of vehicles we drive. And because these energy system changes cut across our economy, the good news and bad news about the federal policies is that they take so many different shapes, that there are incentives from homeowners, there are programs for schools, there are programs for new vehicle adoption. There's programs kind of at every level, from the city to the state, to the school, to the homeowner. And it's kind of complicated, which is why it's been nice to sort of see these efforts like the Science Moms website and other resources that help to distill what is the news that you can use in your district for your kind of organization. But really, it's almost unbelievable that for 50 years we've been treating climate and air quality as two different issues. And the air quality side of things has been regulated under the Clean Air Act, and it's been a good news story. I mean, once we got to 1970, the Clean Air Act was put into place, our air started getting cleaner. We turned the corner. But even though things for carbon benefit the air, it's not really the case in the reverse order. There's a lot of things that we can do to make our air cleaner, and we have done, like putting scrubbers on coal-fired power plants, but that does not do anything for carbon. So I think what we need to be doing is thinking about how can we get these win-win benefits and take the billions of dollars that we're already putting into our clean air and leverage those kind of investments to also address climate.
Yeah, absolutely. So Science Moms thinks a lot about our kids and how air pollution and climate change are affecting our children. Can you all speak a little bit more specifically to some of the special impacts on children of air pollution, climate change, some of the extreme weather events that are being exacerbated by climate change? Why are children so vulnerable?
Maybe
Erica? Go ahead, Casey. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I might start with the air pollution and hand off the climate to my colleagues. But just in the sense that children spend so much time outside, they are developing so rapidly, their lungs are vulnerable. And when you hear about, sensitive populations, it's really always children, the elderly, and people with pre-existing conditions like asthma. So I think when you think about who's benefiting from air pollution and air pollution controls and cleaner air, kids are really at the top of the list.
Yeah. Erica, you
I can just add too that, there's also been a lot of work on the vulnerability in sort of maternal, pregnant women as well are also vulnerable. So it starts at that stage as well. And that's really important to recognize. And as well as the fact that it's not just the physiology that is affecting our children, but increasingly we're worried about mental health of these changes and how it's affecting their security in the world and their sense of safety, but also their ability to go outside and enjoy nature and appreciate the things many of us grew up with. And so I like looking at it very holistically, that we're really protecting a livelihood for our children as well as their health.
Yeah. Joellen, you want to jump in on this?
We have to get up earlier and earlier to walk our dogs in the summer, and the number of 100-degree, 105-degree, 110-degree days. We're looking at right now 17 to 20 more days of extreme heat here in Tucson. And by the end of the century, if we don't cut our emissions, we're going to be looking at something like 90 days. It's a really big change to the length of what for us is our cabin fever season, when you have to stay indoors because it's so scorching outside. My daughter was riding her bike a couple of years ago and came home, and it wasn't even full summer and it wasn't even full sun. And she came home with a headache and clammy skin, and she had signs of heat stroke. it really brought it home to me as a mom that what we're doing every day now, the more stuff we burn, the more CO2 is in the atmosphere, and those molecules of CO2 will hang out in our atmosphere for up to 600 years. So every one that everybody doesn't put in the atmosphere, and that's why one by one, yes, we need big government action. Yes, we need to do things together, but also everybody. And before everybody says, but wait, what can I do? You do know already since 2007, when the Supreme Court ruled that the carbon dioxide is covered under the Clean Air Act, since Tracy mentioned it, I'm going to bring it back up. Carbon dioxide is covered under the Clean Air Act. Now, we don't have regulations really yet that cover all of this, but since that time, since 2007, we've cut 22% off US peak carbon emissions, 22%. And we did that, and most people don't even realize that our peak emissions were back the year my oldest son was born, right? So his entire lifetime, we have been cutting carbon and growing our economy and our population while cutting our carbon emissions, basically decarbonizing our economy and giving it that lift and energy without the pollution that will keep us too hot, warm our oceans, bring in these hurricanes at 5s instead of 3s or 2s or 1s. I mean, these are incredible changes that have big multi-billion-dollar disasters price tags to them, which we're paying every year for our citizens, not let alone the rest of the world. And I feel like people don't realize we're already making that change. And if we stay on the same trajectory we're on, especially given these new clean energy laws, we'll have cut half of our emissions, fully half, out of our economy while growing the economy by 2032. It's an extraordinary achievement, actually. And I have such hope. And I'll just say, I don't want my kids to have to do this heavy lift. I'm okay with it being us. I'm okay with us digging in and making that change and trying to save, change that economy, even though it's tough and we have to think harder and work harder at these things. It's worth it so that they're not having to lift it for my grandbabies.
Absolutely. Let me remind the Weather Band community that you can start to put questions in the Q&A tab. And I will be happy to relay those questions to our speakers, and we'll get their answers for you. And that'll be fun. And in the meantime, we're heading into the summer season. And so we're heading into extreme weather seasons. We're going to start seeing more of those heat waves. One's coming for the Pacific Northwest for this weekend. We're going to start seeing more wildfires, more of the heavy downpours that cause flooding. As we enter this crazy extreme weather season, can you help folks understand the connections between climate change and various types of extreme weather? And, and it's maybe in particular how these affect children. So can we start with you, Tracy?
Sure. I think when we talk about climate change, it's often on a global average basis. And, it can seem like a degree, 2 degrees, like that's not that much. But the truth is, when we're actually feeling the climate, we don't feel the global climate. We don't feel the annual climate. We feel the weather on any one day. And with a shift in the means comes a shift in the extremes. And so we're seeing what used to be, a 100-year temperature now becomes a 10-year temperature, then becomes an almost every year temperature. And so the hottest days are becoming hotter. The hot days of a summer are becoming more frequent through the summer. The heavy rainfalls that maybe a bridge was built to handle are becoming more frequent. And then there's heavier rainfall than any bridge was built to endure. And, actually just this week, one of my PhD students defended her PhD, and she was looking at how buildings should adapt to address the changing climate. And, really what that means is how should buildings address to deal with extreme weather? Like how big should an air conditioning unit be to meet the heat that may be coming down the road that isn't reflected in the historical trends of heat, but are going to be unlike something that we've seen. And I think that this idea of being ready to deal with these extremes, having infrastructure from roads and bridges to runoff areas to cooling centers, and making the investments with an eye to the idea that building schools that are adaptable to the next 50 years, which we know are going to be different than the last 50 years.
I can share a little story as someone who studies wildfire. When I first started walking in burned forests, I used to study wildfire in Yellowstone National Park, and there we would walk through some forests, and I'd be looking at the soil and taking measurements of trees and that fun stuff, which I still love to do. That forest that I walked through that was blackened by a wildfire had occurred every 150, every 300 years for the past 10,000 years, as far as our historical records show. And so it was the vegetation is used to it in the sense that it has adaptations in the cones to release the seeds in the fire, right? It needs the fire to actually regenerate. And that was a story of resilience that we were trying to say, that, fire is normal. It's a regular part of some forested systems. And then, so that place is not supposed to burn for another 150 years. I went back 15 years later and it had burned. A 15-year-old stand. 15 versus 150, an order of magnitude difference. And that's something, again, just in my scientific career that I experienced. So that's just sort of a very palpable example of the kinds of different systems that we're seeing, ones that we haven't seen for 10,000 years really are coming to be much more common. So the question is, will those forests be resilient to these changes? Will those cones be able to regenerate if it burns every 15 years versus every 150 or not? And that we don't know the answer to that scientifically for the vegetation. But what does that mean for society, right? If society gets hit an order of magnitude different pace and severity of these kinds of events, that really gets to be quite complex question for us to answer as a group. And I think moms have a lot to say about that.
Absolutely. And the wildfires are getting larger. The wildfire seasons are getting longer. And could you say a little bit more about fire and how it's changing and how it's affecting our lives and our health?
I love talking about fire, so I'd be happy to do that. There are fires right now in Alberta right now that, early in May, which is very early for that part of the world. So, we know how to go out with our kids and make s'mores over a campfire. We know we need the wood. We know we need a match. And we need the wood to be dry, right? And these same ingredients is what's happening at scale to our forested systems. So we have more people living in our landscape. So while a lot of these fires are started by lightning, a lot of them are started by people, often by accident, sometimes on purpose, unfortunately, but most of the time by accident. Sparks and electricity wires and those kinds of things can cause us, trains. But then our fireworks. Biggest day of the year is July 4th.
Just incendiary rounds like we had just up on Mount Lemmon last week. Oh.
Yeah. So you need that ignition source, and we have a lot more of that around. You also need that wood, you need that fuel. And this isn't a direct climate change factor, but it's a really important factor when thinking about the amplifying effect of climate change, which is that we've removed fire from the landscape for more than 100 years in many parts of the world through fire suppression and Smokey Bear and, iconic characters that our children do recognize. Those, it used to be that Smokey Bear said, prevent forest fires. And until he realized, well, some fire is natural in some places, and now he's just preventing wildfires. But that's a fun fact. But anyway, Smokey did a lot of damage to our forests and pulling wildfire out of systems that really needed that fire. And in that absence, we had a lot of fuels, a lot of wood grow up in the middle of the forest. And so now when a fire comes through, we call it ladder fuels because the flames can actually crawl up into the canopy in a way that didn't used to happen in the past. And for some systems that creates much more severe fires than they had ever experienced before. And then the trees, the adaptations that they had to those little quiet fires, will not protect them when they're experiencing these really, really big fires. So more fuel in our forests, more ignition, and then you get to the climate change angle, which is that it's drying out sooner in the year. We have less snowpack, less snow melt. Our rivers are drier, so there's just less water around, and so the trees are drier too. And then you also add on to that very heat domes and droughts that are coming through and drying out the systems as well throughout the fire season. So you put all those three things together, and that's why we're seeing a lot of the mega fires that we are in the Western United States and Canada.
Yeah, thanks.
And caused by drought. I'm an oceanographer. I use robot float supercomputers and satellites to try and predict what happens next on planet Earth. And global warming for me is really ocean warming, because 93% of that Earth energy balance, what goes in versus what gets out, 93% of that energy balance is going into our oceans and warming them. And that warmth is doing wild things to our climate and weather. And I live out west, and our west is drying everywhere from Montana, where I grew up, and up all the way to Alaska and down to Arizona. We're in catastrophic drought. And you can see this in our reservoirs. We're about to have massive water wars between California, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, because the Colorado River, provides drinking water for 80 million people, and there isn't enough of it anymore. We are something like 15 feet from no longer having any water going to Las Vegas, and Las Vegas has no other source of drinking water. Really, seriously. So and you know what, that drought, it's really funny. We haven't had a big El Nino, the big oscillation slosh of water in the tropical Pacific, since 1998. Want to know how long our drought is? Since 1998. Not a joke, people. It's not just warming, it's actually changing our climate patterns. We've got increased westerlies, increased easterlies, and that increased wind, it's basically blown out all our El Ninos, which used to bring a lot more water to our west. So it just doesn't happen anymore. So sure, it's going to keep doing, we're going to have more wildfires. We're going to have difficulty with bark beetles in our forests because we don't have enough freeze days anymore. We're going to have a lot of deadwood. We've seen our forests turning brown. We've seen all kinds of these impacts, but for us out west, it's drinking water, it's agriculture, it's our food, it's our water, it's our way of life. So when I look at my babies and I think about us cutting our carbon emissions and what that might do to basically righting the ship out in our ocean and on our land, I think, wow, sure, we have to adapt, but let's mitigate too. I would love it if we bent that carbon curve in our lifetime, because right now, my dad's, he's like Forrest Gump, he says, the ocean these days is like a box of chocolates. You blow the surface layer off and you never know what you're going to get. Used to be, it was almost always cold water. These days, it could just be endless hot water, driving big hurricanes like Ian and Harvey with all this damage, and making our droughts droughtier, and drier, making our floods floodier and wetter. And here in Arizona, we are ripping up bridges with floods, at the same time having to get rid of our cattle because we don't have enough water to give them to drink. Watching our riparian areas suffer, while not being able to mine the rare earths that we need to do the green energy transition, because mines require water too. I mean, these are incredible challenges that all of them. So when we say we want to start Cleanversations for our babies, right? It's where sustainability and prosperity really align and are deeply focused on what our babies will breathe, how many emergency room trips it takes and how stuffed that emergency room is, how long you have to wait to see somebody. These are direct impacts and long-term impacts that are piling up. And we're just reaching out to our mom village here and saying, come on, you can help us. We can change this. I know most people didn't have this in school, right? Especially us older folks. And so if we can make it easier and simpler for you to see the sorts of impacts from our day job and give you really great hard-nosed advice about how we can change things, you personally save some money, save a buck, save the planet in your adapting to not burning, but also all of us together locking arms to make a better, more sustainable, more prosperous future for everybody, but especially those small ones that are depending on us.
Thank you, Joellen. Really, really well put. We have a couple of questions. Chris asks, doesn't this past winter's snow provide more water to the reservoirs? So after the big
Absolutely.
snow and the big atmospheric rivers, tell us about how that's affecting the water situation in the West.
I was just looking at this data the other day. Of course it does, but it doesn't fill them. The whole point is what we get is for one deep winter, most of that will run off. It won't actually fill our reservoirs. So while we'll have a good year and we'd like to see more of that, although maybe not quite so big that it busts everybody's roofs because of the pileup of snow in the Sierra Nevada. On the other hand, we've seen that while the spike is really wonderful in the total snowpack and the runoff, that actually the increase in the reservoir height will be much more modest. The yield on that is just, it's good, but it's not great. It won't fill them. So some of them are doing great, but a lot of our really big, deep ones will need multiple years of better.
Another question from Chris. He or she asks, what about removing meat from our dining tables? Does anyone want to address diet?
Cows are thirsty. I'll just say from an ag community, cows are thirsty. And now a lot of people really like beef, but did you know it doesn't take quite as much water for chicken or pork? And technically, according to the doctors, it's better for you too. So it isn't even that you have to remove meat. It's that maybe you want to change what your, change the kind of meat or even go more veggie. But a lot of our emissions, direct carbon emissions, are not ag. It's mostly our energy system. So we've been focusing on the sort of benefits from that. But sure, cows are a very thirsty part of our ag economy. So it does affect water, but emissions wise, ag's not number one. Our energy systems are.
Right. Go ahead.
Sorry, Susan. Yeah, so I agree with Joellen 100%, but just in the same way that there's a sort of embedded water cost of animals, there's a lot of embedded carbon and kind of everything that we consume, whether it is, the cars we're driving or the clothes we're buying or the food we're eating. There's this embedded carbon. And because carbon lasts in the atmosphere for 100 years or more, it doesn't really matter whether it is coming out of our tailpipe or, our home when it's being burned. It's sort of like, what did it take to get there? And one of the issues about a meat diet is that it took a lot of energy going into the production of those animals. And, when I think about it, like, if you grow a field of vegetables and eat the vegetables, you've had a nice dinner. But if you're thinking about, and here in Wisconsin, we have a lot of agriculture. And if you are thinking about raising animals, like, you have to raise those animals and keep them warm in the winter and help them grow over a long extended time period until it's potentially time to butcher them. And then you have a meal for dinner. And so either way, it's a meal for dinner. But in one case, there's been, maybe months and months of energy that's been going into growing the food and driving the tractors and burning the fuel and making the fertilizers and all of the other inputs. So I think that this idea of, embedded energy is one of the things that's unique to thinking about solutions for climate, because it is all coming from burning fuels, but some of that burning fuel is happening behind the scenes that we don't see. So I do agree that, if you run the numbers, definitely the less meat you eat, the better it is for the climate, and the less intense meat you eat, the better it is for the climate. And if that is something that resonates with individuals or communities, then that is a great path to be celebrating. I think, though, there's also a downside, because I think a lot of the opposition to climate comes from this narrative that you have to give up everything. You have to give up your car, you have to give up your hamburgers, you have to give up going to the baseball game, like all these things. And I will say, I love a good cheeseburger. And I think that there's this balance that we want to think about as scientists and as communicators about where is the best message to put the burden on the shoulders of the individual. Where can we empower the individual to make choices, especially win-win, like healthy, cheaper, good for the planet, which a nice stir fry is. And where should we say, you know what? Like, this is a problem that needs to be handled at the policy level, at the energy company level, at the energy system level. And let's stay focused on where the big actors are and where the big decisions are. And I think navigating those scales is a little complicated and resonates differently with different people.
Absolutely. Really great points, Tracy. And one of our questioners has raised the issue of methane. And so I did want to make that point that cows and sheep produce methane in their digestive tracts. They burp a lot of it out through enteric fermentation, right? So if you're eating beef or lamb, there's a lot of methane production. And just from that part of it, not even counting the manure, which we have with all animals, and the methane that comes out in that way. Does anybody want to say anything more about that?
Yeah. I could just jump in, because at Penn State, we recently got a large award for one of our faculty members to work on that exact problem and to develop ways to sort of raise cattle and similar animals that does not release as much methane. And that's through better diets. It's through other kinds of feedstocks, to support those systems, all through the food chain there. So there is actually really exciting research to kind of minimize some of those problems. But yeah, this is a big problem. Of course, methane has greater sort of, we call it warming potential, per molecule, so compared to carbon dioxide. So it does have a fairly large impact. And then you also factor in that most of a lot of the beef that we eat is actually coming from places like the Amazon. And so it's tied together with deforestation practices. And so not only are you releasing methane through, as was nicely described here, some of the husbandry of the cattle as well, you are removing the stored carbon in the forests that used to be there. And so that's kind of a double whammy effect. But I to Tracy's point, like, I am a pescatarian, so but I have really struggled with that, because I work and live around communities that hunt meat, and that is a very local way and a way humans have persisted forever is to hunt your own meat and to get it locally. And that is a strategy that if I had started it when I was a child, that that's much more sustainable than us purchasing beef from Brazil. So yeah, I think we have to really be open to all kinds of, especially when you talk about food, right? Like, as moms, we understand, like, people are picky when it comes to food, and you got to go with that flow and see where in your diet you can make those changes and where you feel most comfortable making them.
I was giving a talk at the Library Ladies out in Sunsites, which is one of our farming communities here in Southern Arizona. Mostly cattle, not actually other, we have a lot of things like cotton, citrus, etc. here, and lettuce and veggies and yums too. But they actually, one of the farmers who were there actually asked me which of the new feed that was available for reducing the methane emissions from his cows I favored. I had no idea. I had to learn. It actually was extraordinary when you're challenged by, when we say we've cut this 22% off, most of this is not government action. It was individuals and small companies and farmers and regular folk across the country making wise decisions, one by one by one, by group, by it feels like sometimes we think that of course we need government action. And I always think of like those Dunkirk stories about when they evacuated the boys off the beach in during World War II, and they couldn't get the big warships in, so they sent the little boats, right? And I'll take 5, I got 8, here's 3, and we forget how much we can do. And while I 100% support, additional government large-scale action, it's our voices, it's our tiny boats that get this done, that have been getting this done. And so I just want to encourage everybody, if you're in a farming community, do that. If you are in a big city, do that. Everybody needs to do their own little piece. It's not done in some big, someone else will take care of this for me. It's one of the things we do with Science Moms is just tell everybody, look, we can all have an impact. Let's do this together. Let's swap, let's share about it. Let's speak up, because we need all these levels to make this change. We have to agree that it's important and then work on it, move together. And some of that's already been happening. And I just would like to see that accelerate, because of course, maybe we've done some of the easy parts, and there's a lot more tough stuff that's going to happen. Like we increased insulation on our roof when we got it done, but we really do need to switch from that big, expensive, not very good HVAC to a heat pump. But that also means I probably need to do my windows eventually. We already have, it's an ongoing conversation. It's going to take lots and lots of help. I think it's not enough to ask our cities to be more efficient. We need our rural folk to do it too, but not necessarily the same solution. There are different solutions for different communities. And I am enjoying watching the kind of innovation engine in the United States just kick in. They are smart and capable and inspired to do good and do well. And I think we've got a lot of work to do, but boy, is it inspiring.
Absolutely. So Katie asks, how does working with your mom community to make change differ from what it's like to work for change in your day jobs? I'd like to hear from each of you on that, if you would. Would you like to start, Tracy?
Sure. Yeah, I love this question. It's there's a lot of layers to the answer. And I guess maybe I'll just start by talking about, when I think about my day job as a scientist and a professor, we've been trained since we started graduate school on what are the norms that make a good scientist. And, the very logical, very rational, don't tell stories, show lots of plots. And part of it is asserting not just the facts, but also that you are an expert in the facts. So it's good to use a lot of technical terminology and, show that you know what your acronyms mean. And in some sense, like these ways of joining the culture of science and proving that you belong are taking you further and further away from public communication, but also into this traditional scientific culture that was definitely like built by men. And I think there's a lot of male normative behavior that is just baked in to what a scientist is and does, because for hundreds and hundreds of years, all of the scientists have been men. So actually, until the Science Mom program started, I never, ever mentioned my children in a work context ever. And I would rarely particularly try to appeal to people's emotions. But it's been really exciting to see how much enthusiasm there is for the Science Moms program. I've been giving a lot of different talks to different community groups and newspapers, and they're just as interested to hear about, my feelings toward my kids and what my kids think, and, how I emotionally juggle things as they are for me to explain some graph or some science concept. So, I do feel like in a way it's sort of, to me, been really exciting to take these two parts of my life that I had kind of made a wall between to keep them separate. And then by bringing them together, I feel like, it's been awesome to kind of feel like my whole being is being activated through this approach.
Oh, great. Erica, you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, that was great. That was really well said. And I definitely resonate with that. I guess just to add, I also work a lot now with all sorts of communities, not just moms. And I see a lot of similarities with that, and in terms of how we conduct our science generally. And I work with Indigenous communities. I work with Indigenous communities in Africa, as well as the United States, and also rural communities, and thinking about what the needs are from each of those different community perspectives and how that informs the research that I do. Right. And like I said at the beginning, I started just studying soils and trees, and now I'm studying people more than anything now, and thinking about, okay, well, I know this climate change is a problem. If I'm really interested in solutions, I need to be working with people to help, translate the science that I know into solutions. And so, yeah, so my science has changed over the past while, and I now am asking different kinds of questions, and so I'm listening more. I'm listening to what moms around me are saying, and that's shifting the kinds of things I get interested in and excited about researching. And so it's become much more of a cycle and a feedback loop than I think it ever was before. And certainly I get a lot of that from moms specifically. And also moms are kind of kick-ass, and it's kind of empowering to be around them all the time, and to just sort of, moms are working really hard, and dads too, and all of the parents are working really hard. And they're doing it in all different ways. Like, we happen to be doing it as academics, in science, but there's a lot of energy out there. There are a lot of women contributing to their communities in different ways, by raising their kids at home, by working in schools, by being doctors, being healthcare providers, and tapping into that energy is really what we need to do. And I think that's what Science Moms is also trying to capture.
Yeah. Joellen?
Oh, aren't these moms amazing? I know, isn't it just fantastic? I think when I was a lot like Tracy, where she says, I never talked about my kids. I was tough and hard-nosed and would go to sea and would do the things. And, there's no math, no satellite, nothing too crazy and I find that, especially with my community, my state here, I'm an oceanographer in a desert. I live in the Sonoran Desert. I live out in saguaro country. I see saguaros and mesquite trees right out my window here. And once upon a, the Greeks said that there were three ways to make an argument. There was the logos, the logic of the argument. There was the pathos, the emotion of the argument. And then there's ethos, which is, who are you to make this argument to me? And this is one of those things where I want to broaden that conversation, and so bringing my identity as a mother, right, and as a big red state kind of girl to this conversation, it changed not just who I talk to, but how I talk to them, because we have a shared reality, a shared work that we're doing together, whether we know each other or not. We are creating the schools, the state, the roads, the everything for these babies that are, that we're trying so hard to raise. So it changed a lot, both about how I think about myself and how I think about them, how I think about my kids, my job, my role, and how much we have maybe been blocking all of our taxpayers and community members and moms and everybody from being part of this conversation about, what do we do next? How do we protect our livelihoods and our prosperity and our kids' health and the weather? Literally, how long is our hot season? My mom's lilacs up in northern Montana, when she moved into the house, her lilacs bloomed 23 days later. Right? They're blooming 23 days earlier on average every year now. This is an enormous change for, this community of, in northern Montana. So I deeply feel that, like, this has brought a richness to my life and my understanding of who we are, how we exist on planet Earth, what these systems really mean, who we have to talk to in order to actually make change. Because as a scientist, I'm in my, lovely, office working with my other scientists, and I'm not the electrician or the guy up on the pole. I'm not the one out in the field or trying to decide what kind of feed to feed his cattle. I'm not the one who's going to change the allocations in the Colorado River. And yet we all have a stake in this. we're in this together. And it's been such a joy to bring these conversations, these parts of our life. Who am I to make that argument to you? Well, as a scientist, not much, but as a mom, I'm like everybody else you know. I'm just like you.
Perfectly growing off of what you've all said. You're doing this Science Moms thing for a reason. You think moms are uniquely positioned to be thought leaders in the move to do something about climate change. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why do you think moms are so uniquely positioned to take these kind of leadership roles? Tracy, you want us to jump in?
Yeah. So I think, studies have shown that within households, mothers make a lot of the purchasing decisions. They are receptive to information. I mean, we're often thinking about, what foods are best to feed our kids, or what vaccines do they need, and what's the best way to be getting them ready for school. So this idea, this sort of planning and decision-making ethos about moms is something that I think hasn't been activated so far. I would also say that, I am a fan of empowering everyone. I'm not, but there haven't been initiatives targeted toward moms in the past. And I think that there's a lot of community across moms. There's a little less partisanship, or at least maybe more willingness to sometimes, separate, like, okay, we're just taking care of our kids versus this climate change is a political issue. So, my feeling is, you don't know, everybody has to be involved in this discussion, and there's different ways that will resonate with different people and different communities. And I think, but what's been exciting is to see how much the sort of Science Moms narrative and approach, and moms talking to other moms, has really taken off.
Yeah. Erica?
Yeah, again, well said. I only will add that, moms juggle a lot if they're anything like me, which is to say, our to-do list is gargantuan, and it doesn't matter, whether you have a job inside the home or not, or outside the home. I mean, we just have a lot on our plate, and I just don't think climate's been up there, right? We're trying to take care of our kids. We're trying to, get a paycheck to, pay for that next bill, so we haven't really, as Tracy said, activated the climate muscle in our moms, but it's always been there. And our job here as Science Moms is to help make the connection that if you care about climate, you are also helping your pocketbook. You're also helping your kids get healthy. All those other things that were high up on your list, you can achieve by attacking climate. And that's all we're doing here is sort of activating what's already there, I think, by many moms.
Joellen?
Actually, think momfluencers are everywhere. They have a lot. They are expert communicators. We have, partly because we're all, frankly, half-assing it, doing our level best, but feeling like we're never quite measuring up. We're always looking for better information, a better way to do it, and we have this big mom village that is helping. We help each other because we know how hard this job is. Kids need a lot, and it is so tough these days. And it means that, and especially post-COVID, there's a lot of despair in those babies. And one of the things they're worried about is climate. It's a biggie. I would like to have grandbabies someday. I would, #life goals. And I'm worried that if we can't crush this problem a little better, they will choose not to, right? Birth rates are way down. Not that we want them to necessarily be high. I'm not advocating anything. I'm just pro-baby. I enjoy little ones and would love to have grandbabies eventually. I'm done having mine now. And I love it if we were making the world a place that was a great place to raise a kid, right? Where our kids felt like they were needed and loved and had opportunity. Right. And I feel like so much that, like, from a practical standpoint, we're offering solutions that are good on every level. We're not talking about things that are hurting. We're talking about things that are making it healthier, making it better, and making it cheaper. And, we're not in bed, we're not dependent on dictators, or petro oil states, or, there's so many benefits here to the sorts of choices that we're making that I feel wholeheartedly, like my whole self, that this is a wonderful way to go. And there are many great options, and different states are going to make different choices about their non burning CO2 choices. Here in Arizona, we have a nuclear power plant that provides 43% of our electricity, 50 years old, paid for. It's awesome, right? But that might be a choice that California says they don't really want any more of those, but we're trying to cite another one here. Different communities are going to make different choices, and that's fine, but we should all have the same goal, which is healthy, happy, prosperous babies that eventually give us grandbabies.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you all. So on that note, I think I'll wrap this up because we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much to our science moms and to all of you from AMS Weather Band for joining us. Let me also remind you that you can go to sciencemoms.com to learn lots more about what Science Moms are up to, and follow Science Moms on Instagram and all your other social channels. And I will turn it back over to AMS to wrap us up. Thank you all so much.
Well, thank you so much, Susan, Dr. Russell, Dr. Holloway, and Dr. Smithwick. Thank you for taking the time to join us and to share out on this important topic. I'm super inspired. So yeah, but this, just coming from a dad standpoint, I'm all in too. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and audience, thank you for joining us as well. Please keep in mind that all webinars will be available to Weatherband members at amsweatherband.org. And if anyone has any further questions, or if you'd like to talk about the webinar, members are welcome to discuss on the Weatherband community forum. And I also sent out a little chat to all about joining AMS Webinars mailing list to hear all about our upcoming webinars. So with that spiel being done, I again would like to thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to our next webinar meeting. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.